strip away the technology, the trade networks, the financial systems, and the one thing that cannot be replaced, the one input without which modern agriculture simply ceases to function, is phosphorus. You cannot grow crops without it. There is no synthetic alternative. And the overwhelming majority of the world's accessible reserves sit under a single country, Morocco. That is not a metaphor. It is a geological fact with geopolitical consequences that most people have never been told. Phosphate rock is the source of phosphorus used in fertilizer. Carried phosphorus is one of 3 essential macronutrients every plant requires to grow. Nitrogen can be synthesized from the atmosphere using the Haber-Bosch process. Potassium comes from deposits spread across many countries, but phosphorus has to be mined. It exists in finite concentrations in rock formations laid down over millions of years. And unlike oil, which has at least partial substitutes in solar, wind, and nuclear, phosphorus has none. No phosphorus means no fertilizer. No fertilizer means yields collapse. Yields collapse, and the math of feeding 8 billion people stops working. The U.S. Geological Survey estimates Morocco holds approximately 50 billion metric tons of phosphate rock reserves, roughly 68 to 70% of all known global reserves. As of its 2025 mineral commodities summary, the number 2 country, Egypt, holds approximately 2.8 billion metric tons. Morocco holds nearly 18 times as much. After Egypt, you get Tunisia and Algeria, each in the low single digits. Then the rest of the world. What makes this even more concentrated is that a significant portion of Morocco's reserves, estimates suggest around 10% of its total, lie in Western Sahara, a disputed territory Morocco has controlled since 1975 in a conflict that remains unresolved under international law. The UN considers Western Sahara a non-self-governing territory. The Polisario Front, backed by Algeria, contests Morocco's claim. In 2024 alone, 26 ships carried 1.45 million tons of phosphate out of Western Saharan ports, according to the Western Sahara Resource Watch. International courts have questioned the legality of resource extraction there without consent of the indigenous population. Meanwhile, OCP's conveyors keep running, carried. The world keeps buying. OCP, the Office Chez Refined des Phosphates, is the state company through which Morocco controls this resource. It is not a small operator. OCP reported revenues of approximately $9.8 billion for full year 2024. Carried in the first half of 2025, revenues hit $5.7 billion, a 21% increase over the same period in 2024. The company exports phosphate rock and processed fertilizers, DAP-MAP TSP, the downstream products that farmers in Brazil, India, and sub-Saharan Africa apply to their fields every season. In 2024, OCP moved a record 12.37 million tons in exports. OCP's top export destinations in 2024 read like a map of global agricultural dependency. South America, 26% of revenue. Europe, 21%. India, 19%. Africa, 18%. In India, OCP products cover more than 90% of domestic diammonium phosphate consumption. In Brazil, the world's largest soybean producer and one of the most critical links in the global protein supply chain, OCP supplies roughly 40% of the phosphate-based fertilizers that keep Mato Grosso yields competitive. When OCP's prices move, so do the input costs for farmers growing soybeans in Brazil, rice in Uttar Pradesh, and maize in Zambia. The fertilizer price average on international markets rose from $520 per ton in the first half of 2024 to $589 per ton in the first half of 2025. According to OCP's own reporting, a 13% increase in 1 year passed down to farmers who have no alternative supplier to turn to. In the first 10 months of 2025, Morocco's fertilizer exports to Brazil alone climbed 30% year-on-year, reaching $1.31 billion. This is the dependency that most food system discussions either understate or omit entirely. The green revolution of the mid-20th century, the surge in yields that is often credited with preventing mass famine, was built on synthetic nitrogen, improved seeds, irrigation, and phosphate rock. The phosphate part of that equation was always finite. Researchers have modeled phosphate rock production peaking somewhere between 2030 and 2070, with non-Moroccan reserves potentially exhausted within 50 to 100 years at current extraction rates, leaving global agriculture increasingly dependent on a single source, at Morocco's own rates of extraction. Analysts note the country's reserves could theoretically last over 1,000 years, but that longevity is only relevant if access is guaranteed, prices are stable, and no political shock interrupts supply. Morocco has understood this leverage and is deploying it deliberately. OCP is in the middle of a $14 billion investment program to expand processing capacity, integrate renewable energy into production, and deepen market relationships across Africa. The results are already measurable in Ethiopia. Formulated fertilizer has increased teff yields by 113% and maize yields by 37%. In Nigeria, corn yields rose 48%. In Senegal, millet yields rose 63%. These are not charity programs. They are market-building operations that tie African governments' food security agendas directly to Moroccan supply relationships. The country with the fertilizer becomes the country with the relationships. So what breaks this? Not easily. Morocco is not at war. OCP is not under sanctions. The mines at Kouriga and Boukra are not about to disappear. But choke points do not only fail through war. They fail through price shocks, political leverage, export restrictions, or the slow realization that there is no plan B. China has periodically restricted phosphate exports to protect its own domestic food security, sending shock waves through global markets each time, a preview of what a Moroccan export restriction would look like on a scale 10 times larger. A Morocco that decided to restrict exports, for any reason, political or economic, could trigger global fertilizer shortages within a single growing season. Crops planted without adequate phosphate see yield losses of 30 to 50%. There is no strategic phosphate reserve, no equivalent of the oil stockpiles Western governments maintain, no backup mine coming online in a country that is not Morocco. Western governments have spent decades building IEA emergency oil reserves precisely because they understood what a supply disruption would do to their economies. Nobody has built the equivalent for phosphate, and the reason is simple: nobody wanted to admit the dependency was that severe. Phosphorus is older than oil as a constraint on civilization. Every empire that collapsed from agricultural exhaustion, every famine that followed a failed harvest, was in part a phosphorus story told before anyone had the vocabulary for it. We now have the vocabulary. We know exactly where the rock is. We know exactly who controls it. And we have chosen, collectively, to do nothing about the concentration. The world's food supply has a single point of failure buried in the Moroccan Sahara. Most people eating dinner tonight have no idea it exists.